Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Severin and I would like to share with you here my research that I have done over the last few months because I wanted to understand how is this crisis going to look like that we are about to face. How can I protect myself and therefore how can you protect yourself? And that protection also means understanding the cycle, the timeline that is going to play out and why this is necessary, and therefore actually easing into the struggle and seeing the meaning or the bigger picture. And for this I have been sharing with you in the first video my astrological prediction, so the viewpoint and over how long this is going to play out and what are some of the key elements, so the astrological archetypes they're playing out therefore. And now we're going to become a little bit more detailed, since the financial sector or our economical system is playing a huge role in order to restructure our financial system. So let me share with you some of the key insights that I have found through several people that I found most useful. So this is one that really helps to show you where we are right now. You can see here in the core is the coronavirus. So the coronavirus is already happening now, and basically it just brought up a lot of difficulties because there is no cure for it. And I think it's not even that dangerous in the sense of like that we have to close everything down. We will have to come to terms with the fact that this virus is a virus, and even though we have like clear understanding of how it's transmitted and how we can save ourselves, there is no possible cure to eradicate it. So we cannot just simply shut down the economy, and that's what is already happening right now. We're trying to find the middle way, and that's will coming more and more into place. And there will be countries like in the third world that you see, like South Africa, Africa, and many other countries that simply the virus is spreading, and of course the states in itself as well. And I want to especially look at the United States because they are the dominant factor in our geopolitical power system. Everything is working in US dollar, that's the dominant currency. And we will have to understand, and that's also where we can come back to astrology, and it's just so helpful. Like, it's really a guide to then look specifically where we want to look, and that simply is the Pluto return. Pluto returns every 248 years, and for America, so the United States of America, this Pluto return happens in 2022. So imagine when you have a Pluto return, it's like Pluto, as I explained in the first video a little bit more detail, it's like the very essence of our being. So it's like if you have a Pluto return, like you're completely burning yourself like a phoenix to the ash, and then you're reigniting, like you're reborn again. So it's like a complete destruction and a complete rebirth. So in the positive sense, you could say America gonna be really the leader in the future years for real innovation, for real leadership and authenticity and real change. But that means also first, before that will happen, there will be complete destruction. There will be a complete dissolution. And I will explain a little bit later also why I can back that up with some information on what is going on already. But simply the States is such an important factor. It has a lot of influence what is happening right now. And of course, Donald Trump is just the perfect player to stir America in that role. So he is just an expression, an archetype who is leading and is simply accelerating the process that is happening already. Without him, somebody else would be the leader, but obviously there's nobody that could do it better than our dear Donald. So let me explain a little bit. With the coronavirus, what's basically happening right now, there's a lot of uncertainty coming out. And the uncertainty is basically this wish of coming back to normal, which is never gonna happen, even though mentally we are attracted to the familiar, to structure, to stability. But if we are honest, and if we have this chart and understand a little bit more, then we see that already we are in a deep part of unemployment already now. In the States now, in June, the latest data is that the unemployment is up to 11.1%. That seems it's not so high, but this is going to grow much more. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what's happening right now, simply because there is a lot of fear out there, insecurity and debt. And that means what is coming now actually is the next part, which we're already seeing also now. Stimulus is coming out. So all the banks are printing money and putting money out in the system, which is necessary and the most efficient way to keep the system alive. So that's simply what is happening right now, that we have a stimulus. So from there is basically that you will see that leads us to businesses. Even though there is more money out there, some sectors simply have to close. And you will see that already now, like some of the airplane companies will close. Some may be coming back, some have maybe enough liquidity that they're trying to make it through that crisis, but you will see like hotels, restaurants, like conferences, events, sports events, like all sorts of businesses are affected by that. And then we are actually coming more to the personal domain, like where we are not having a job. Out of the unemployment, we cannot pay our rents, we cannot pay our credit card debts, our mortgages, and that means there is more fear. So even though you have a stimulus from the banks here, that means there is a lot of fear out there, and therefore you're not willing to invest the money that you have, and that means like less people are willing to go into vacation. They go to buy some food in a restaurant. So we have to become more like conservative and self-sufficient and plant in our garden. That means it's simply less and less money in the system, even though the stimulus from the banks is like there's more money than ever before available. And in the States, for example, when you look at the stimulus, like we have been in 2008, we had about $9 trillion US dollar in the system, and now it's doubled or triple to the amount that we had like almost like 10 years ago, and we are about to print more. So that's kind of what we're in right now. So what we're seeing then is a recession, and the recession is simply the moment where there is enough money available on the market, but nobody is spending it. Therefore, the market is not working. There is no productivity because nobody is buying the goods, even though there is enough products available. We see a lot of little companies, big companies closing down and not coming back, and that's simply like the whole market is cooling down. And if you have that, that's called a recession. But if that recession then is actually longer, over 6 months, then it becomes a depression. And that's actually what we're into. Like, this is not just something short. This will become a long-term dynamic, because we are losing faith in the very system that we have been following for so long. And that's when we need more money, because that's the easiest system to then just put more money in the system. And that's basically then when you create less value. So right now, just to understand, about 80% of the countries in the world are asking for more money. So it's not just some countries. And if you're not a first world country with a good rate, then it's very hard to get to more money. So basically we will see even a collapse of entire governments and states and feds. And that's what is exactly makes this situation so difficult that we are in. It's almost like it will become a double recession. And what we're then going into, and that's like the last point then, it's an inflation. And the inflation is like what you maybe have seen pictures of from the World War II in Germany, when the basket with which you carry all the money inside around is more worth than actually the notes that you're carrying. So it's like you're printing so much money that you're simply actually losing the value of your money. And we have currently our money that we are having, all the currencies, they're not backed up with a real good, with gold or hard value, and they're fiat money, and that means they are basically not having any worth itself. So it's basically just trust, and the more we're losing trust in the system, the more it destabilizes, and that's exactly how the financial crisis is going to play out. And after that, we are ripe for actually restructuring and a new financial system. So that's one part that I want to share with you. Let me share something else with you. So let me share with you another map that really helped me to understand what we're in for. So wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. let me go through each of the waves that we are seeing happening like after each other, but also simultaneously. So the wave number one is probably the easiest to understand because it's us, it's private people, the consumers that are not able anymore over the next months to pay their debts. And that's simply because we have lost our job, we have maybe already have a big mortgage, we already have credit cards that we actually shouldn't pay money back, we have rents that we should pay, and that will lead us in a big problem where we cannot pay anymore the goods that we have. And we already see right now, for example, you can buy, for example, cars like almost for free, for no interest rate. You can get money cheaper than ever. So it's not a problem that there's no money available. It is actually that our financial system is not working anymore. So the capitalism is running out actually of consumers. So that's really a very interesting dilemma that we're in, and you will see it will actually implode from the inside. And that's in history always has happened. Like if you want to change a system, it has to collapse from the inside in order to make room for a new one. And here again, like we just have to study history. It's not that this is new what's happening and has been happening before, but this crisis we are in right now, it's actually not a crisis, it's actually a collapse. And that's what we are in. And that's something that we cannot even imagine because we have never experienced that, and that's like once in a lifetime, and it's happening now. And it's really good to have just an idea of what's coming next, to not be afraid, but see that procedure like as a natural phenomena that we are just privileged to experience, if you could call it that way, right? So then we have the second wave, which is then the corporation debt. So that's all the companies and big corporations that are basically as well, they are renting businesses, or they're renting places, they're renting like office space just on a much bigger scale, and therefore their influence is much bigger. And basically already right now they have a bigger impact at the personal consumers, but they are owing up to 85% of what they are supposed to pay by the end within the next 6 months. So basically we're just seeing that even more money is waiting there to be paid back. And what that leads to, and this is already what we're seeing now, is that some companies have to fail for bankruptcy, where they can simply not maintaining their business, or they're asking for funds for being paid out by the state, and that's then the third wave. But basically we're seeing more and more companies simply closing, and that can be from the hotels to the restaurants to the airline companies. And the airline companies, it's also gonna come and speak a little bit more about that in the end. But imagine like airline companies closing, they use less fossil fuel, and fossil fuel, petroleum, is one of the goods, that our world is running by. And you see so many fossil fuel companies are closing already, which shows like the blood of our arteries, of our system, is freezing and not needed anymore. And that means the very essence of our system is collapsing, and that just needs time now that it reaches all the little places where it's connected to collapse in itself. And that's what's happening from a corporate level. It's like it's an implosion, so it's not an explosion to the external, to the internal, it's an implosion. So it's happening from within, like more and more companies will close, or trying to make it through the crisis and over long term, but they have to actually let go of a lot of jobs and resources. So you will see like the unemployment is just becoming bigger and bigger over the next month. That's what we're in. And then out of these two waves, we will have the third wave, which is kind of the countries who are in a way companies by themselves, because they're owning some of the Fed, so they're printing money by themselves. And then you will see some of the countries, let's say for example where there is already war, like the Yemen for example, or Iraq, where you have war going on, or some countries in Africa where they already have had a very destabilized surrounding in the last years, and now with this crisis that they're facing, they will be pushed much faster into bankruptcy. So you will have entire countries going bankrupt. And our global debt, if the number says anything to you, is up to 257 trillion. I mean, that's horrendous. It's the biggest number we've ever seen, and we cannot even imagine that. But just to give you an idea, it's like we cannot just print more money. There's people out there, and I know a friend of mine who's saying, yeah, that's no problem, we're just going to print more and more, but this is going to have an effect and we're going to pay for that, and that's basically what's coming next, where it leads to an inflation and then a hyperinflation. And what this is going to lead to, like the countries that will suffer most from that will actually be like Greece, who already has a very difficult situation. And then we have like Venezuela, for example, you know, Chile, Argentina, South African, Africa in general, South American countries, Central American countries. So not the first world, but even the first world, Spain and Italy will ask for a bailout. They will need more money. European Union has to print more, and then actually it will cause a lot of problems on the stock market, because there is basically a stock market crash coming. That's the next part that's also going to be involved, and that will lead to a loss of the dominion of the US dollar that we have seen. And that will take time. This is a bigger picture that we are speaking about, but it's basically a restructure of power, and that's what we're speaking about when Saturn and Pluto are coming together. It's a restructuring of power, and China is ready to take that place. China has already made the yen digital. They're much more ready to step in the age of Aquarius, which is about community. In the USA, it's important about fulfilling your dream, or, you know, like about yourself, the individual, while China is all about we. It's about the family, it's about the community. And it's also, China is, even though it's the big brother that we are afraid of, China is ready and has launched the digital age to a much further process or state that America has done. And we will see like this power struggle will be ongoing. Probably Russia will be the lucky third, you know, who kind of not is under the control anymore from America. But there is a big shift happening already. And to just further kind of speak about that, we will have the sale of the century going on probably by next year or two. So basically what we're seeing is like this first wave is kind of, you know, being fed by consumers, but the second wave will actually hit kind of the crisis that we are in, and we see that in the next 3 months. So already now that we are in July, August, September, this is happening already now, that more and more closing, and this will feed then more the individuals who cannot pay back, and that's what we're going to see the next month, more like August, September, October, November, December, until the end of the year. So basically that's what's happening until the end of the year. So this year is already like done, you could say. There is not more highlights gonna come, it's just gonna become more difficult. We could even speak about the Mars return or the retrograde that's happening, which makes us then, you know, try to, like a little child having a tantrum while the whole scenario is gonna be ruined and playing out in front of us. But this is then gonna lead us to the third wave, which is happening more like by next year. And that's what I'm seeing in the next 2 years happening. So in 2021, 2022, where we have the beginning of some countries first, like Venezuela and other countries who are already in a bad shape, to then really being hit, and probably coming more to that Pluto return that I have been speaking in 2022, where then the states also gonna lose kind of their dominion, and we will probably have a dollar crash. And about that, let me share a little bit more. So when we have this stock market crash, it's not obviously coming by a crash, but simply because we have less financial liquidity. There will be less money on the stock market involved, even though we don't see that right now. It's simply because we're becoming less global. The corporates have debt by themselves that they cannot pay, so they cannot invest in the stock market. And that then will lead to a stock market crash, and out of that will come a restructuring of the financial system. So that will be a big part. So when we look at airplanes, which is our preferred way of traveling in the world right now in 2020, when we look back a year ago, we're only back to like 25% of the traffic we had a year ago. So that's amazing, like when we just look at that number. And we will not go back to 100%, never. Simply because the restrictions that we're facing right now are severe. Like, we have to make these tests, we have to have a security distance, we have to wear masks, and then we have to go in quarantine. Some countries are not even open, and the constant change and the insecurity and the uncertainty will prohibit us from actually wanting to travel. On top of that comes that we are not sure if we have enough money that we can actually afford such a long distance journey. And on top of that comes the fear that since this virus is airborne, that we could catch it, because the air conditioning in the airplane is actually probably, the data is still missing for that, but it's very likely that it's much easier to be caught in an airplane because of traveling. And that means people will stay at home more and more. That means that we actually gonna see a huge shift of what we have been used to, of how we have been accessing the world. So even though we could, we will not go back to the old. And when we speak about that, then we also have to consider that a lot of the trips are actually business trips. So when you look at an airplane, the business trips are actually much more expensive, or the suites, or the luxury travel, and they make up for a lot of the prices that actually that the economy has to not pay. So let's say a lot of business trips have accommodated themselves by not traveling anymore and just arranging their meetings online. That means somebody has to pay now for the airfare, because they anyway have probably now less people in a plane, and that simply will lead to that our plane tickets will become more expensive in the next years. So that's something that already has been out in the news and is assumed, and it's very likely being followed shortly. So some of the experts out there, Stephen Roach, one of the top experts of the economy in Asia, is saying that the dollar crash is certain. Ray Dalio is also saying that it's very likely that the power that the American holds is declining, and he's sharing that in his book. So in order to speak about the dollar crash, we have to understand the money system in itself. And for this, I have been following a video from Roger Hamilton, which you can find online. And in general, like, we have to see the financial cycles in a bigger picture, and people like Warren Buffett, like Bill Gates and Ray Dalio do that. So Ray Dalio is actually writing a book, The Changing World Order, in which he is actually examining the financial or the economical system not just in 20-30 years, but actually in 100 to 500 years. And every economical key player actually came to a rise and then has been making space for the next leader. So you can go back to the Dutch Empire, and then it was the United Kingdom, and then the Americans. And we are seeing just simply now that we are again in a transition phase, and the waiting winner is, or the next participant in that phase is China. And when we look at the money cycle that I just have been presenting back here, then we understand maybe a little bit better what is happening right now. Normally, like in the first cycle, it's hard money. That means like it's literally gold, or it's something of value that you cannot just give away, like without losing money. So then the next one is when you make claims on that hard money. So actually, for example, paper money, you're decoupling it from gold, but it still is backed up by that gold, for example. Then you make further claims or further debt on that money. So that's what we have been seeing in the last century. And then it becomes a debt crisis, a default and devaluation. It's actually very interesting. I can see if I find that chart somehow, like how the US dollar has been losing so much value over the last 100 years. And we don't even notice that because we simply get more money. So the more you're paid, it seems like that we are earning more and there is no loss, but literally to the dollar that we have once been earning, or it has been out there, like there was such a decrease of value that is actually frightening. And then the next part is simply what we are seeing today is the fiat money, where no currencies actually have any more connection to hard money, which is actually a real money. It's all just numbers, and it's all decoupled from any real value. And then what we see at the last stage, which we are in right now, what is happening over the next 5 years, is the collapse and then the return to hard money again, or like finding a new financial system. So since the 17th century, of all the 700 currencies that have been existing, by today we have only 20% that actually have survived, and all of them have been devaluated and decoupled from real value. So only like 20% is what is left, and even that is now what is actually kind of collapsing and what we see in a downfall. So the last part then is to understand what is actually necessary that something like a dollar crash, which is so unimaginable, could actually happen. And for this, I'm using these three parts. So what we need is a rising rival, which is actually putting economical and political pressure up on the states, which we have. China is a huge political and financial influencer and creates a lot of pressure upon the states. So there is a rival that is ready to take over footsteps of the United States. And then the second two, they're playing together. So there's a lot of growing debt. So when you print a lot of money, if you are the leader, then that doesn't mean that somebody could step in. But if you are doing that, plus you actually have a weakening of the currency. So let's say people don't believe in the US dollar anymore, and they're using actually more and more different routes, and they are investing in different currencies or different assets or gold and silver and cryptocurrency. And then all the three parts are given that in the past the key players like the Dutch or the United Kingdom have lost their power to a new world leader. And that is what is happening now, and this will come more. And then the next step basically is that we have a revolution and wars going on before we can reconstruct a new world paradigm. So this is what in my eyes is laying ahead of us, and according to some experts like Stephen Roach, he says this will happen in the next 2 to 5 years, which I'm backing up by my astrological understanding, which is exactly falling in place, and that makes me more and more believe that this is what's the future gonna bring. And this brings us then to our last part, in which I want to share with you what can you do personally in order to face a recession, a depression, and how you can go through it and plan for it already now. So in this last part, let me help you to support you in the process that we are all facing together, what we actually can do when we are going into a recession. So if you have money, then diversify. So the first part is definitely like, don't just invest into one currency or in one country or in one place. Diversify. That's really important. Like, I'm not a financial advisor at all, so you can check out other videos. But what you can do is like store in safe countries, and that's definitely not the States, that's definitely not the United Kingdom or Australia. These are all countries that's just gonna print more. It's definitely not the European Union, even though they seem safe from the beginning. There can be Singapore, there can be Switzerland, like find small countries like New Zealand that you can try to invest. But even better, I would say, go out of the currencies and bet against them. So you can buy into real estate, or you go into silver, you go into gold, or you go into cryptocurrency. My personal opinion is that there is no solution yet here that's gonna be the future. I think even cryptocurrency is simply we cannot trust the state or the Fed, and therefore we invest in something else. But we will find the solution by going deeper into the crisis, and out of the crisis we will find a different solution. So figure out what works for you and that you trust by going through in this crisis. So on a personal level, I would recommend you these things that you can do. So whatever you can cough out that you have to kind of spend, like the fixed costs on a month, you know, any subscriptions, anything like from your gym, spending less money for a vacation or for a restaurant, anything that you can kind of reduce really helps. Then the second part is pay off any debts now. That's really the most important. Try to pay off any credit card debt and any car debt, anything that you actually have, like have it done now, that you create some liquidity that you can pay that off. Then also one of the most important things that you hear wherever you're trying to search for information about how to face a recession is create an emergency fund. So you want to actually have cash or money available when that moment comes, when you are not having access anymore to it. So then go out of the stock market. That's my opinion personally. I think the stock market is actually not having a crash. It's actually it's going to become really difficult. So either be for the long term, and that means like 10 years or more, or like go out of it now before you are getting into problems when actually it's really moving again. Because right now it's still supported by the Fed. It looks like that everything is good, but this will change in the future. And then more important, I would say, are the last two, where we have to create an inner peace. And that's a part where it's simply like some of the things we can simply not control. All the conspiracy theories, all the books or information that we search online and try to get on top of it and understand who is behind, why is this happening, and who is the badass who is trying to make us suffer. In the end of the day, it doesn't make you feel good. You don't feel you're in charge of your own life, you don't feel empowered, you don't find any meaning in your own life, and that leads you to you becoming more sensitive, you becoming snappy, you becoming, uncomfortable in your own skin. And that's exactly why we have to create inner peace. And inner peace is simply when we go out in nature and we reconnect. So connection with nature is actually connection with ourselves, because there is not so many distractions around us, and that's where we are connecting with our own inner being again. And that would be then ultimately going into yoga and meditation, where we're really coming back to ourselves and finding that connection no matter how difficult things are around us. And that's what then inner peace is coming from. So it's not depending on something, but it's being actually grateful for simply being alive, even though things are looking bad. And then the last one, what do you truly want to invest in? And that can be anything. Maybe it's right now where things anyway not working, that you always wanted to do a change in your life, and like now it's kind of unavoidable anymore. Like there's no more excuses, and there is the change that you always were looking for, and you can do it right now, because anybody is facing difficult times. Everybody is going to this risk time. Everybody don't know what's happening tomorrow exactly. And what we can create is community, take care of our neighbors, support others who need help, because hopefully they are paying you back when you need it. And that is then cultivating a surrounding that even goes through hardship. So that's all I have, sharing a process with you that has been challenging for myself, staying in touch with me, staying centered and grounded, but simultaneously not hiding, and informing myself what's going on without then getting lost in fears and worries, and finding that middle ground. So I hope that was helpful for you, supporting you in your own process and giving you some meaning. So please stay in touch, subscribe, reach out, comment, and I will share more information with you during these turbulent times that we are in, and processing my own process and spilling some stuff out for you that's coming out the other side. So with this, I can only say all the best for the future.